Necromancy is Runescape's newest combat style and it really shows what the EOC can be, so let's dive into how to play it as well as some tips and tricks that I've learnt from my first few days with the skill. Starting off with the two types of abilities in Necromancy, we have necromantic abilities from your Death Guard and conjures from your Skull Lantern. You want to be using both of these to get the most out of Necromancy, but let's dive into necromantic abilities first. Necromancy uses a builder-spender system with 3 resources: Adrenaline, Residual Souls, and Necrosis stacks. There are 2 basic builders that generate these resources. Soul Sap generates Residual Souls, and Touch of Death generates Necrosis stacks. You want to keep these 2 abilities on cooldown as much as possible, so you can even set up a 2-size revolution bar for them so that the game uses them over basic attacks. And on the note of basic attacks, Necromancy has a slightly different basic attack to other styles. It acts like a filler basic ability in how much damage it does, and adrenaline it generates, however it's not a basic ability, so isn't affected by effects like Fury of the Small. It does, however, incur a global cooldown. Now we've started building some resources, let's start spending them. Residual Souls stack up to 3 and are shown as orbs under your adrenaline bar, as well as on your buff bar. There are 2 ways to spend Residual Souls: Soul Strike and Volley of Souls. Soul Strike is an AoE which also stuns, using a single soul per cast, so use it when you need a stun or for AoE damage. Volley of Souls requires at least 2 Residual Souls, but is best cast when you have 3. It fires all souls at a single target. These abilities do the same amount of damage per soul, but using Volley at 3 stacks uses the fewest GCDs for that damage. Next up is Necrosis stacks, which cap at 12 and can be found in your buff bar. There are 2 main ways of spending Necrosis stacks. First up is Finger of Death, which is a large single target hit that costs 60% adrenaline, minus 10% for every Necrosis stack it consumes on cast. The other way to spend them is the special attack found on the tier 70 plus Death Guard, called Death Grasp. This special attack has a 30-second cooldown, found in your debuff bar, and deals a sizable chunk of single target damage. It also consumes all of your Necrosis stacks for extra damage. Having around 8 Necrosis stacks ready for this special will cause it to hit for huge damage. We also have some other adrenaline spenders. Float costs 20% adrenaline to put a dot on the target that spreads to other targets when the first one dies. Spectral Scythe is unlocked via the talent tree and is a 3-stage ability that costs 10, then 20, then 30% adrenaline. It does considerable AoE damage as well as generating Residual Souls. And finally we have Death Skulls, the ultimate ability of Necromancy that is affected by the Berserk Cape. It costs 100% adrenaline and sends out a bouncing skull that bounces between enemies or yourself in single target that bounces 4 times. With the Berserk Cape, the adrenaline cost is reduced to 60% and it bounces 6 times instead. This ability is very important for Necromancy's DPS cooldown, which we'll cover in a bit. The last ability to cover is a utility one, that being Blood Siphon. This ability drains health from all nearby mobs, then does a big single target hit based on how much it drained. It's incredible for sustaining an AoE and the damage is nothing to ignore either. Conjures are up next, and there's currently 3 of them. They all take ectoplasm to summon, so remember to bring that with you. The Skeleton Warrior is the simplest conjure. It doesn't cost adrenaline to summon or to command, and will attack your target with auto attacks. Its command empowers it for a short time to do more damage. The Putrid Zombie is an AoE focused conjure. It costs 50% adrenaline and auto attacks as well as emitting a poisonous cloud for AoE poison damage. Its command causes it to explode and deal huge AoE damage. Finally, the Vengeful Ghost is a healing focused conjure. It costs 30% adrenaline to summon, and like the skeleton, it will auto attack your target, healing you based on the damage it does. Its command is the first one to cost adrenaline at a huge 70%, but it causes the ghost's attacks to apply Haunted, which causes enemies to take double damage from all attacks up to a cap. Conjures are very much worth summoning in a fight, but take some time to get set up. However, you can summon them out of combat and command the ghost without spending adrenaline, so you want to be starting your fights with all 3 conjures out and the command ghost activated. As for cooldowns, Necromancy has 2 DPS cooldowns, Living Death and Split Soul. Split Soul is the simplest one to understand. For 20 seconds, your soul split does damage instead of healing you. Simply use it right before using all of your big hitting abilities. Living Death is a bit more interesting and unique. Rather than applying a damage buff, it instead augments a bunch of your abilities for 30 seconds, as well as resetting the cooldown on Death Skulls and Touch of Death. The augments are that auto attacks apply Necrosis, Touch of Death generates more adrenaline, Finger of Death hits harder, and Death Skulls has a much lower cooldown. The way it seems best to use this cooldown is to use Death Skulls as many times as possible within it, and use Finger of Death to spend extra Necrosis stacks when your weapon spec is on cooldown. This cooldown heavily benefits from using an adrenaline potion, so use it when you have that available. To be honest, you could do a whole video on the Living Death rotation, but as long as you're using adrenaline on Death Skulls and spending Necrosis stacks on free finger casts, you'll get a lot out of it. To see Necromancy in action, let's look at her mod. These weren't speed kill attempts, but rather my usual kills when farming plates for the power gear. Before combat, I summon all 3 conjures and command the ghost. Then I open up the combat with Death Skulls, letting Revolution fire off my builders. And from here, it's very much a case of reacting to your resources. Using Volley of Souls at 3 souls, the weapon spec at 8+ Necrosis stacks. While saving Necrosis stacks for the spec, I spend Adrenaline on Bloat and the first hit of Spectral Scythe to fish for an additional Residual Soul. Otherwise, the excess goes into Finger of Death. And that's the gist of playing Necromancy outside of cooldown. It's a simple style to play, but it heavily rewards you for using your resources correctly. So, to summarize the priority rotation of Necromancy that I've been using, first, you want to keep Death Skulls and Death Grasp on cooldown. Then, you want to be using Soul Sap and Touch of Death to keep those on cooldown. Volley of Souls when you've got 3 souls. Put excess Adrenaline into Finger of Death, and Bloat and Spectral Scythe if you want to save Necrosis stacks for an upcoming Death Grasp. How you use cooldowns kind of depends on the encounter, so just adapt accordingly, and don't be afraid to just let the auto attack fire if you don't have anything to press. It will give a good amount of adrenaline, and it'll even generate some Necrosis stacks when you're in your cooldowns. The last part of this video is a talkthrough I did of one of my next kills when doing the tier 80 tasks to get power armor, so I'll be leaving that in here just as a kind of example of a more complicated fight using a Necromancy, so I hope you enjoy that. So, overload back here, because you got a lot to do when you get in there. Chuck curses on, summon familiars, or conjures. Use the Vengeful Ghost's ability. Drop a Von Bomb there. And Death Skulls. Yeah, that didn't even Von next. Fix that. Death Skulls into weapon spec, and then just basics for the rest of it. Then come over here and bloat the ad into Volley of Souls. Get ready with Range Prayer. We're going to be fingering a deathing here because we got some spare Necrosis stacks. I got hit by something. Let me just heal that up real quick. We're going to run away and weapon spec. No, the weapon spec wasn't enough. I don't actually need to resummon any ads here, so I'm just going to bloat. I can resummon. That's an awkward timing. So grab this Ancient Ceremonial top quick, Revon Bomb. Then we're going to Adren Pot because I have an awkward amount of Adren. Death Skulls, Volley of Souls, Weapon Spec, dive out the red. And we didn't actually phase that very well, so just gonna stay here and try and take her down. This is the first time I've not actually won. Oh no, I did one phase it. Okay, same deal again. Bloating the ad is taking more adren. When I'm going this fast, I'm using way too much. I'm not getting enough adren, to be honest. Freedom here, use Resonance. I've got lesser Bone Shield on for the res. And then same deal again. Volley of Souls into Weapon Spec here. And Finger of Death. Get away from Contain this. I am a bit low on adrenaline for what I would normally like to do here, so I'm probably going to get another prison, so I'm going to dash away. I can't freedom, so I'm just going to Vit Pot. Pray Mage. We're on to Glacies now, so I'm going to resummon my Conjures against was Bloat. I don't actually have enough adrenaline for Bloat. But I'll volley a souls to get us through this so we don't get the next prison. Okay, we are getting the next prison. That's unfortunate. Same deal again. Just freedom, resonance, overheal. Prayers on. I can't prayer. I can't adren renewal here, so this is going to be a wonky Zara's phase. So, because I went into the blood phase too fast, I can't actually adren renewal here where I'd want to. So I'm basically just letting the basics revo away. And I'm going to Death Skulls. I've already Death Skulls. Oh, there we go. There's the Execute. The Execute is either Invoke Death or the tier 70 plus gear effect.